What's going on, everybody? I'm Jerry, and today I'm going to be going over all my grades for all the trades that happened today on Halloween, October 31st, the trade deadline, which partially explains my orange shirt. You might be asking, Jerry, why are you wearing an orange shirt? Well, the only reason is because it's Halloween. I've worn a black shirt every video that I've made. I wore an orange shirt today. The video's in an orange shirt. That's what you get. So we're gonna go over every trade today. What grade that I give it, both teams, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let's just get right into it. Starting off, we have the Leonard Williams trade. I thought this was a great trade for the Giants. We weren't. I don't think anybody was expecting them to get a second and a fifth. I think second was probably the highest that anybody thought, and even talk of possibly a third. So great trade by the Giants, wanting to get rid of him. Haven't really been great this year. Clearly not going to be a part of the team moving forward, trying to, build a team. But I also thought this was a decent trade for the Seahawks. Granted, the Seahawks probably need a little bit more help on the edge. But I like Leonard Williams over there too, kind of similar to Draymond Jones, who's there now. But I think he's just going to be a weapon on the defensive line. Leonard Williams is still a great football player, so it makes sense to me for him to go over there. They definitely need help on the defensive line. I think with seeing trades like with other edge rushers like Chase Young or people looked at potentially this kind of trade compensation for a player like Danielle Hunter. Would have liked to probably get him more. I don't know if they engaged in any talks about it. Maybe the Vikings weren't having it, but to me that would have made a lot more sense. But I get an A plus for the Giants for just getting way more value than anticipated, and just a B minus for the Seahawks because again I think it adds to a position of need. I don't necessarily know if it's the best case scenario, but the Seahawks have looked great. And when you add a playmaker like this, I don't think you can knock them for it. I couldn't go under a C for that reason because I think it still makes sense. I don't know if there's something they're going to add with a second and fifth unless they decided to go into some sort of a rebuild for whatever reason, but I think they have a good football team. They've got a nice little core there between Tyler Lockett's still not super old, DK Metcalf, JSN, and then you got Kenneth Walker's been great in the backfield. So aside from Geno Smith getting a little bit older, I feel like that whole team, there's really no reason to go into a rebuild mode. So I had to give them a B minus. I think Leonard Williams will fit in nice over there. Again, maybe not the best fit, and I still think an edge rusher probably would have been a better target, especially with seeing, like we'll see later, Chase Young gets traded. Why would you not go after him for the time, or even Montz Sweat for a little bit less value? Seems like a better move to me. They end up going after Leonard Williams, and again, I'm very happy with the Giants there. A plus, B minus for the Seahawks for the Leonard Williams trade. Next, we have Montz Sweat. I went back and forth on what I wanted to put for the Bears on this one because I think the positives are we'll go over the Commanders first. So the positives for the Commanders are they just got a second round pick they pretty much made it clear that they were going to at the very least get rid of one of their defensive linemen. I actually think if they only get rid of Sweat, I think it's an A plus just because it's a second. But because they get rid of Chase Young, now you've got a big opening there. You have Daron Payne and a solid interior, but you just lost Montz Sweat and Chase Young, and I think that's gonna hurt them a lot. I don't know if they're going into like a tank mode, but with the edge rushers, there's not that one standout edge rusher in this next class that's going to be a generational talent. Like we talked about Will Anderson, who hasn't been amazing so far, but and Jalen Carter and a couple years back, who I can't think of his name right now. It'll come to me in a second. Micah Parsons, like players like that, where there's not one of those in there. So how are the Commanders? Chop Robinson maybe, or Jared Verse has gotten talk but hasn't been as productive. A couple people there that they could fill in, but so that kind of puzzled me that they got rid of both. Again, it'd be an A plus if. I hate to factor that in because the trade grade alone probably should put an A plus on there because getting a second round for Montz Sweat makes a whole lot of sense. For the Bears, I put a C because a C minus because it's a position of need for them, but it's just a very weird situation. So at first my mind goes, well, Bears are now claiming him and they'll get him next year. If you bank on off season, there's no guarantee that they're going to get Montz Sweat or Chase Young or whoever it is. Maybe there isn't a good edge rusher prospect and then you just miss completely. But on the negative side of it, now they just traded a second round pick for him, so they're going to have to pay him, and he can use that as leverage. So I think that hurts them there. I think the worst part is he probably ends up getting traded either way with the talks. The talk was to the Falcons for like a third round pick, which their pick's like kind of in the middle of the draft. So the fact that the Bears went all the way up to a second, which their pick's going to be early, I don't love that either. That's why I get a C minus. I actually debated on going D plus because the other part of it, you have to think like, what are the Bears going to do? There's a lot of talk about the coaching staff wanting to be fired. Why would you make a trade for a player when you're going to get rid of the coaching staff? What if you hire a DC runs a 3-4? Montz Sweat's a very 4-3 guy, so that doesn't really make sense to me either. But I'm kind of making the same face that Montz Sweat is making up there, where he's just like I don't know. It doesn't. I like it because the Bears need it, but the part that scares me the most is I don't believe in the coaching staff, and if they think that this is going to help them keep their job, I don't want that. I'd like Flus and Getsy to be out of there. So if this helps them keep their job, I'm really not behind it. Seems odd because you could get them in the offseason for nothing. Again, maybe you can't. And I think that the other reason that why I'm back up to a C minus is because if you can't get either of these guys in the offseason and there isn't a premier edge rusher who Montz Sweat is the third ranked defensive end in the run game, and he's like 18th or 19th in pass rush, and is up there in sacks and has a high pass rush or a pressure percentage. So it's like he's played well this year. Other part you have to factor in, and he's been playing with Deron Payne and Chase Young. He's going to go into a team where he's going to have to be the guy. We saw the same thing happen with Yannick Ngakoue over there. Every season he's played, he's gotten 8 sacks, goes to the Bears, and he has I think he has 1 sack or 1.5 sacks halfway through the season. So same thing could happen to Sweat. I don't love it. I would have preferred Chase Young because especially at the third round pick, the Bears are rebuilding a team. Like if the 49ers and the Bears switched with who they traded for, I think these trades would be way better both ways because the 49ers are getting a guy who's been better right now and adds another big threat to the other side of that line. Whereas Chase Young, I think it's great upside moving forward, and because of the value they got him at, it's a cheap rental, but it just makes more sense for Montz Sweat. He's been better. He's a more now guy, and Chase Young is more your developmental, going to be better down the road. I guess for any team, especially the 49ers in this case, the money's going to be cheaper for Chase Young too. So I don't love this trade from the Bears. That's why it gets a C minus. I was kind of waving between a D plus, C minus. I think C minus fits. Again, Commanders won this trade for me. I think it's close just because I think the Commanders, they have to be knocked though for getting rid of both players. I don't really understand that. So we'll get into Chase Young later, but in my opinion, as of right now, Bears lose this trade and they get the C minus. Commanders get A minus. Moving on to Josh Dobbs. At first, when I saw this, I was like, what the hell is the point of this? And I got to give a shout out. If you're watching, Jake Lace predicted this. I said he was an idiot because Josh Dobbs is horrible. And horrible's a bit of an exaggeration. He's not horrible. I just think he's pretty bad. He hasn't looked good in recent weeks. He looks like he could be like serviceable backup. Like I'd still put like Gardner Minshew, for me personally, would be ahead of him. I still think Minshew's one of the top 32 quarterbacks. I think it's okay for Dobbs to start, but it's going to be in this case where like you have an injury, you don't know what you're doing moving forward. So it makes sense for me. Originally, I thought this was going to be a really bad grade, but it ends up being a bad grade for the Cardinals because granted they have Clayton Tune, who can come in and, they're supposed to be getting Kyler Murray back, but Dobbs would be, as I just mentioned, a very serviceable backup and would play well for the team. And when you're trading a 6th round pick and getting a 7th round conditional pick that actually could be a 6th, with how the trade's set up, it's very likely that it's a 7th. But there is a world where the Vikings traded up in the draft and got Joshua Dobbs, which is mind-blowing to me. But even if, like, the Cardinals pick's going to be towards the front of the 7th round, and the Vikings pick's going to be probably mid to low, so, like, you're probably talking about, like, 20, 25 picks, and that's at most that they're trading up with this. So it doesn't make any sense to me. I would have expected this to be, like, probably a 5th, maybe a 4th if the Vikings are including another pick. But that's why the Cardinals get a C-. Again, I understand it because they chose that they're not going to have him moving forward. But Kyler Murray's had injury problems. He's had wanting to play video games too much problems. So what if he has a problem and he can't play? Now you don't have Josh Dobbs to fill in. Clayton Tune, I don't think is going to be it either. So good trade for the Vikings here. Again, I didn't think I was going to be grading this one very high, but with what they had to trade, just a 6th for somebody to fill in for the rest of the year. Again, I don't know if that's necessarily what you want because I still don't think Josh Dobbs is leading you on a playoff run. So it kind of ends up being, to me, like, what's the point in it? It makes me want to not put an A- in there. I think the reason I keep it in an A- is just because of the value. Like, it really didn't cost you much. The only place where I really think it hurts you is if your team does do better. There's 2 things. So you don't get to see what you have in Jaren Hall as much. He's going to play this week. But if they end up putting in Josh Dobbs, you're not really going to see what he is. If Dobbs doesn't play, then why did you trade for him? And as far as, like, it'd be nice to they drafted Jaren Hall. You might want to see what you have in that or be able to develop. With Kirk Cousins being on a contract year and being injured, likely not coming back, it would be nice to at least see what you have in Jaren Hall so you can be 100% confident that you want to draft a quarterback. Because, again, I don't think Dobbs is who you're going with moving forward. So very weird trade. Dobbs has got a similar face to me on this one. But, again, shout out to Jake Lays for completely just calling out this trade a full day in advance when I had no hope that it was going to be happening. So you got it right, buddy. Congratulations. On to the next one, Ezra Cleveland. This one I went back and forth on what to make the grade because at first I just saw a day 3 pick and I gave the Vikings a better grade here. But then I saw a 6th round pick and I went, whoa, okay. Because Ezra Cleveland, I think it was 15th ranked guard in his position by PFF, which I don't really believe because I personally don't think he's done very well in his years. I do watch the Purple Daily or listen to the Purple Daily podcast, and they talk a whole lot about problems with Ezra Cleveland. They have a segment with, it's called Trenches with Boone, Alex Boone, former Viking, and talks about it, and I never really hear much good about Ezra Cleveland. And so although PFF's graded him pretty well this year, hasn't played well, the fact that the Vikings only get a 6th round pick, if you have that ranking out there, they did just get Dalton Reisner, who I guess they're very confident in because they traded away Cleveland, who's, I believe he's definitely younger and being graded well. So that didn't really make a lot of sense. That's why I ended up with C+. I don't think he's good. So it's like, sure, you're getting something for him and you think you have a better guy in Reisner. But I think it's good for the Jaguars because you can kind of move him around. You could play him at guard. You could play him at tackle. And again, he's being graded very well. That's where the B- comes from. If I had a similar belief to the PFF grade, I'm sure this would be a much higher grade for the Jaguars. But because I don't really believe in Ezra Cleveland very much, ends up being a B- for them, C+ for the Vikings. But makes sense to me. I mean, they weren't going to use him. This is a big trade, one of the biggest, I think, of the trade deadline. But Chase Young had to give the Commanders a D here. I think they were just kind of accepting the scraps at that point. It seemed like they said they were going to trade one, then they decided they were going to trade both, and they just took what they could get for for Chase Young, which didn't seem to make much sense in my mind. Montz Sweat was worth a third, Chase Young was worth a second, and ends up being Chase Young gets traded for a third to a who's been a juggernaut up until these last 3 weeks, but him across from Joey Bosa. Again, I think it makes more sense for the Bears because you've got a developmental guy. It just makes a lot more sense. You can see Chase Young, he's up there going, hallelujah, because he doesn't have to play for the shit Commanders anymore and Riverboat Ron, and he gets to go over and be with Shanahan and a great 49ers team to, worst case scenario, that's why the 49ers get an A in this one. Worst case scenario, they miss out on him, and for losing him, they get a 4th round pick in, what's that called? The compensation. So I don't see, this just makes too much sense for the 49ers. I think Montz Sweat's probably your better option because even if you're getting him on just a rental, he's going to help you win a Super Bowl. We haven't really seen Chase Young prove that he can do it. He's coming off the injury, and Montz Sweat has been better so far. I think maybe that's where my disagreement with the pick comes from. But you have a lot more upside moving forward with Chase Young. If you decide to re-sign him, you're going to get him for a cheaper contract. So Commanders get a D because at this point they could have just kept him. They could have franchise tagged him, even though they declined the 5th-year option, which would probably seem stupid. But even if, and they just franchise tag him, you still have a great edge rusher alongside, Deron Payne and what was known as one of the better defensive lines in the league. Now you send him over to Eric Armstead and Bosa and Fred Warner and Hufanga and all these talented 49ers, and I don't know, a third just doesn't seem right to me. That's why the Commanders have to get a D for that one. 49ers get an A. I think it's a great pickup. Not much else to say there. Moving on, we got Donovan Peoples-Jones. I didn't really know what to think of this one. I loved this picture, by the way, too. You see, he's peacing out to the Browns. That made me very happy. When I found that picture, I'm like, that needs to happen. And here we are. So he's saying peace out to the Browns, moving on over to the Lions. Again, didn't make much sense to me at all because Donovan Peoples-Jones actually led the Browns in snaps. So although, he might not have been the top receiver, he spent a lot of time on the field. Seemed like he was doing good in blocking and, not amazing or anything, but better for a receiver. And seemed like he had a place on the team. And the Lions only trade a 6th round pick to get him. Reason the Lions only get a B is because I don't really see much room for him because Josh Reynolds has looked good. Amon-Ra St. Brown's the number 1. Jameson Williams, has his shining moments. Sam Laporta has been one of the best tight ends in the league. So I just don't know what this does for the Lions. And that's why I was kind of confused about this one too, because it seemed like the Browns could still use him. They only get a 6th, and then he goes to a team with a crowded wide receiver room. So I don't really understand this one whatsoever. Maybe someone in the comments could explain why a team that not necessarily needs receivers, but probably still could have used this receiver, would trade him for only a 6th round pick to a team. And again, I don't even think it's a great trade by the Lions. I think it's good just because you get him for only a 6th. But again, I don't understand why they're doing that because I don't see time for him on the field. Sucks for him too, especially leading the Browns in snaps. And now you're going to go to a team with such a crowded receiver room. Are you going to get much time? I'm even forgetting Khalif Raymond's over there. So, he gets snaps on, gadget plays. You could throw Jahmyr Gibbs once David Montgomery's out back. You could throw him out at receiver. So, doesn't make much sense to me. Either way, Donovan Peoples-Jones says peace out to the Browns, goes to the Lions. C grade for the Browns, B for the Lions. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but here we are. Next, we have the last trade before the deadline, Rasul Douglas, and he is going, woohoo, because he is so excited to not be on those shitty Packers anymore. One of the better corners for them this year, obviously Jair Alexander is the top corner, but he kind of showed out this year. Reason teams typically wouldn't go for him is because he had struggled in the past. But I think it's good for Green Bay because although they give up a fifth, they're getting a third round pick for a guy who I don't really think he's worth it. I guess maybe he ends up being worth it because Bills are getting a fifth. And you have to think that Bills pick's probably going to be a late third. Packers pick's probably going to be an early fifth. So, maybe it's only like 40, 50 picks. You look at it that way and you go, oh, it's not too bad for the Bills to have a Trey White replacement, with their injuries that they're having. But you'd kind of want them, like, you'd almost think, like, why would they not trade a higher pick? I know they were talking about potentially wanting a second for Jalen Johnson. Would they not have done, like, a second for Jalen Johnson straight up, like, for the Bears? I feel like that would have been a better move with Jalen Johnson being a lockdown corner. There was rumors of Jalen Johnson to the Bills or the 49ers. I think the 49ers are rolled out once Chase Young comes in. So you would assume that they were probably trying. Maybe they just didn't want to give up that much capital. I don't think Rasul Douglas makes a massive impact, so that's where we get the A minus rating for the Packers, and then you get a B minus for the Bills because Packers are getting a third round pick who you really could turn into another corner that's Rasul Douglas or even better. And the Bills are getting that fill-in position for their damaged cornerback, or really just for their Trey White. And they're getting a fifth round pick. So that's kind of the silver lining, what ends up being a B minus as opposed to like just a C. I think without getting that fifth round pick, you're probably doing like C minus, D plus even. But the fact that you get a fifth round pick, again, we talked about how late it's probably only like 50 picks different. So, you word it this way, you word Rasul Douglas in a fifth for a third, or you could say Bills trade back 50 spots and get Rasul Douglas. That sounds a little better for the Bills. That's why they end up with a B minus. And the last trade of the day, so no more to talk about here. Let me know what you think of my grades down below, if you think I got anything significantly wrong, or if there's anything that you'd change. Loved going through all these, and I think not as exciting of a trade deadline as last year, but a good trade deadline nonetheless. So had some great grades, had some pretty bad grades, but all is well. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.